and unelected people who shaped our presidents. And we welcome Gary now to Bloomberg. Thanks for being here. It's a fascinating book, Gary. You tell 9 different stories of presidents and their best friends. Go through them. I don't want to pick your favorite. That's not the question. But which do you think is the most consequential, perhaps, at least for history?
Sure. Well, it's like picking your favorite child, I guess, right? To pick your favorite chapter. First of all, thank you for having me on, David. I think the most consequential individual friendship between a president and the person I referred to as his first friend was with Harry Truman and a man named Eddie Jacobson. They met in the military. They actually met in 1903 when Eddie Jacobson was making deposits in a bank that Harry Truman was a clerk at. But they became very good friends in the military and then opened a haberdashery in 1920 in Kansas City. The haberdashery goes bankrupt, but they stayed best friends as Truman rises to become a senator and vice president.
So Anthony, we can't hear you. You're on mute. There we go.
Why that happened? Can you? Yes, I'm back. All right, folks. Thank you. Welcome to the Marketplace Show Reset. I'm Anthony Weeks, executive producer and host, joined by my co-host and colleague, both Linda Dorman and Yvette Wood. This is the segment number 1 on health and wellness. Welcome to the program. We're broadcasting live on radio, we're broadcasting on cable television, we're streaming online, and we are streaming on several social media platforms. And of course, each and every week we focus on the healthcare industry to make sure that we bring you the latest information regarding your health, or should I say, our health. That is the new branding for this segment going forward. It's called Our Health. And we're looking forward to expanding our content and our programming to bring you more information regarding the best advice you can get and information and education you can get on your health. And so today, of course, we're going to have a guest, a part of the program. We have an encore, a return, if you will, of Vicki Braxton. She was so great last week, we just couldn't say no to her being back on this week again. So we're looking forward to engaging her and having another discussion, or should I say expanded discussion on other areas. But before we get into that, before we bring in Vicki, I would be remiss if I didn't share this with you. So while for almost a year and a half, we have had, as not only as a country, as a region, but certainly the global community worldwide, have been dealing with a pandemic, a global health crisis. And so the Alpha variant, which is coronavirus, COVID-19, while it was a major disruption to our everyday lives as we know it, and we've seen the if you will, the morphing of this virus into it just keeps the new strand coming up, and this latest strand called the Delta variant, unfortunately, is it's not good news. I don't know how else to put it to you. Countries who did very well with the Alpha variant are now struggling. I think the latest news out of Japan is that the Olympics may have no spectators at all during the Olympic Games because that they're now seeing an uptick in their numbers. But the most important information that I think I can share, and I'm not the medical professional. I'm not on the front line in terms of the medical field, and my colleagues are in that space. But we are now understanding. We're seeing the variation or sort of the fluctuation of the efficacy of the vaccine against the Delta variant. The last report I read last week, it said that if you were fully vaccinated, you were 88%. There was 88% efficacy against the Delta variant. If you only had one shot of the vaccine, you were 33%. You had 33% efficacy. Now, this week, the new report is saying that it's looking like even though you have the vaccine shot, the efficacy rate against the Delta variant is only 66%. Now, this thing keeps changing, and so I, like you, I'm trying to wrap my mind around this and understand this. But what it says that obviously we just came out of a big holiday weekend, 4th of July, Emancipation Day, obviously in the Virgin Islands, and Independence Day in the United States. And those are super spreader holiday events, right? And so we're not surprised that happened. But what we can't do is we can't now treat the Delta variant as though, now that we're vaccinated, now that we've been inoculated, that somehow we have herd immunity and we cannot transmit the Delta variant. The Delta variant is more transmittable, and it's more deadlier than the Alpha variant. And matter of fact, the irony is the Alpha variant was more devastating to older people. Now they're saying the Delta variant is now even more so harmful to young people. So I'm going to end there. I wanted to be able to throw that in there because this is a serious situation, and we can't go to sleep on this because we're not out of the woods yet. And ladies, I don't know what you have to say about this, but I needed to get that out.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up and making sure the listeners and viewers understand that we are far, far from being out of the woods, as you said. And when you have the World Health Organization describing the transmittable rate at 55% more than the Alpha, or what we understood to be the quote unquote Wuhan, then, it defies your logic that we could conceivably, through our habits of not taking care of ourselves, not social distancing, not washing our hands, not wearing our masks, not getting vaccinated, and not really being very cognizant of our surroundings, we could find ourselves right back where we were in March of 2020 with a more significant public health crises. And it's hard for me to wrap my head around it as not someone at the bedside, but someone who certainly peers in. I'm going to pass it over to our clinical support and expert here on this panel and the conversation, Yvette, and just get your personal and professional experience as well with this.
Sure, Anthony, Linda, good afternoon. Remember when COVID first came out and you heard all the information from the World Health Organization and the CDC. If you guys remember, wear masks, don't wear masks, wash hands, don't wash hands, wear gloves, don't wear gloves. We're seeing a repeat of them trying to figure out what it is that we can do to prevent this variant from spreading. They haven't quite wrapped their hands around it yet. They do understand that it is somewhat susceptible to the vaccines, but it's not 100% susceptible to any of the vaccines, which makes this a little bit more frightening because it's not even the efficacy of the Alpha variant. It's way under that. So you're correct. Both of you are correct in that we must be vigilant in watching this Delta variant and keeping up with the numbers, because what I believe is going to happen is you're going to see that booster sooner than later. And they're working on that right now behind the scenes. I'm seeing all the biotech reports come up on my computer as we speak of how they're working at warp speed, just like they did for the COVID vaccine, to come up with something to help fight this variant.
And as we think about the Delta variant and people understanding that it's COVID, and that we have to think about it in that sense, that it is now, it's being reported again through the World Health Organization, that it is rapidly spreading around the world. I'm reading from a report that has been identified in at least 98 countries, including the United States of America to date. It's now the dominant strain. So it is the prevailing, it's where we have to rank it as number one, and countries as diverse as the UK, Russia, Indonesia, and Vietnam, Australia, and Fiji. Now, some of those seem like, far, far away from us, but when we have an open border and we have somewhat relaxed travel, and we have airlines, and we have cruise ships, and we have individuals now traveling from here to there, this is how it spread before. So, and It's on the rise. So we understand that 1 in 5 COVID cases right now are attributed to this particular strand, and that was mid-June. So those numbers are probably ranking up as we go along. So when we talk about where we are, we have to continue to keep this as part of our narrative and on the forefront of our discussion piece. Absolutely. And I appreciate you, Anthony, bringing that up. And we have to think about, what does that mean as businesses are beginning to reopen, and businesses are beginning to reset their agenda around workforce development, and where workforce development in terms of where their workforce will work. So, and yes, and we have, one of our listeners, Mr. James Whitehead, talked about, and we have schools reopening very, very soon. Schools, both colleges in the early August. And now we have, what do we do with our high school, our primary schools, our specialty schools for those kids, our prison systems where there is collections of individuals. So this is a conversation that I think warrants an ongoing report as we bring in our special guests and talk about
let's bring her up. Let's bring up Vicki. Vicki, welcome back to the Marketplace Show Reset, segment number 1 on health and wellness. We're glad to have you back with us. How are you doing? How was your holiday, Independence Day, 4th of July?
It was great. We celebrated my husband's birthday. He was actually born on the 4th. So it was really wonderful.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday to your husband.
And we had another birthday too. So let's not forget, we had another celebration, I think, in the great city of New York, right? Yvette, you had a birthday on Saturday? Or are you also born on the 4th?
Saturday.
Yep. Saturday.
Yvette is a rock star. When it comes to her birthday, Yvette doesn't play.
That's right.
Yvette goes all out for her birthday, guys.
Does
she don't play.
Okay. So. Well, let's see. We all saw the Facebook. Let's just say we know because we saw the Facebook. So post. Is that it? Wink, wink. Yeah, that's good. That's good. I love it. All out. That was fantastic. Well, if you can't celebrate your birthday in these days and times and age, then, what can you do? And I'm glad that we're here to say that we can celebrate birthdays. So welcome back to the program, Vicki. We did have an encore because the subject of complex and compound traumas is so broad and has so many different verticals that we thought we'd extract one of those massive verticals that we briefly touched on, and that is intimate partner violence, because of its prevailing nature and what has really been identified even through the COVID-19 isolation period, just this growing number of IPV or intimate partner violence that we must get our hands wrapped around, not just here in the United States. This is a public health crisis around the world, having pulled up the reports from the World Health Organization, CDC, the CDC equivalent in Europe, just daunting numbers of what is going on. So hopefully you'll be able to give us some perspective and some information so that we can better understand this thing called intimate partner violence, which frankly, I'm going to be honest, that was not a terminology that I had top of mind. I've always heard of domestic violence, but something more filtered or succinct in this thing called intimate partner violence. Can you define that for us? Vicki, can you hear me?
Sure. So, yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Yes, ladies. So, thank you for having me back. I really appreciate it. Normally, when we think of intimate partner violence is really anyone in an intimate relationship. So you think when we think of it more of husband and wife or boyfriend and girlfriend. But intimate partner violence can also occur with other people that you have intimate relationships with in the family. But intimate partner violence, the way traditionally it's looked at, is really perpetrated more often against women than men. You might have 1 in 5 men report intimate partner violence, but you have 1 in 3 women report intimate partner violence. It affects you regardless of where you live, regardless of your income, regardless of your race. So intimate partner violence across the board affects everybody. So the American Psychological Association describes intimate partner violence as is financial violence, it is physical violence, it is intimidation, it is stalking, it is withholding.
Uh-oh.
So, for example, if you withhold food from, that's considered part of the intimate partner violence circle. So it's really a series of actions designed to keep someone intimidated, afraid, and basically under your personal control.
That's interesting, because one of the interesting things that you just said is the financial violence. I'm trying to better understand that. When we talk about intimate partner violence, is that because someone is stealing your money?
As you know, you need money. That's because maybe let's say you're on a budget and this person is controlling you through a budget, and they find out you've been hoarding your money. They may then turn around, take your money from you, and maybe slap you because you hoarded the money. Because when you hoard your money, that implies you're trying to do something that they have not given you permission to do. So remember, intimidation is a big part of intimate partner violence. So financial intimidation is considered somewhat financial violence because intimidation is a violent act.
So help us understand, is there something that we should understand a little different from the broader terminology, or is it that's a broader terminology than domestic violence? Because here in the state of Maryland, in the hospital system that I worked in, we have labeled our center of support the Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence Center here at University of Maryland Medical System. And I know that there are other similar systems from around the country and the region. Is there something that we should understand a little differently than what it is from domestic violence, or are we just using a new terminology, a more defined terminology to describe the same thing?
So when you think of domestic violence, you really think of violence in your home, in your domicile. Violence, for example, is prevalent sometimes between teens. So they don't live in the same house, but the girlfriend might get beat up when she's in a different place with her boyfriend, or maybe they're around some other people. He doesn't like what she says and he slaps her. So that's intimate partner violence. So they don't live in the same house, but they have violence issues going on.
Interesting. That's a good point. Yvette, you were saying something?
Yes. There's one part of this intimate partner violence that I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with. I'm sure you are, Vicki, as our expert, and that is cultural dislocation, where you bring someone out of their culture into your environment to abuse them. And and that is a complex trauma as well, as we were speaking of last week, but it usually occurs along with this intimate partner violence. So Vicki, with COVID and the restrictions and people not being able to get out or even reach their loved ones for help, have you seen this escalate, the intimate partner violence? Have you seen an escalation most recently?
Absolutely. I referred to the CDC website. I examined the post websites, and there are other sites where you can see that intimate partner violence is definitely on the rise, especially with COVID, because people are stuck in the house. And now, really, that person that had control over you has control over you 24/7. Or that one boyfriend or one girlfriend that you were out with, because women can beat up on men as well. So it's not just an intimate violence also occurs in the LGBTQ community. So it's just really, you're stuck now with this person that wants to control you. So,
as we think about, I'm sorry, I was going to say, as we think about Yvette's question around COVID and the isolation and the impact that COVID has had in perhaps producing these increases, what would someone in that situation, what are some of the warning signs that they should be looking at if they're inside the home or they're inside of a relationship, not living in the home, because you've described it as you don't have to be in the same, residential location. It's just that you're in the same relationship. What are some of the signs that we should be providing to those individuals that we should be looking for, that they should be looking for?
Well, you have to remember, with a lot of intimate violence relationships, people on the outside are not going to know what's going on the inside. Because they are afraid. The person that is having the violence perpetrated upon them lives in fear 24 hours a day. And with women, a lot of times there's a stigma that they get because society tends to blame them for staying in these types of relationships rather than looking at what kind of options that they had. One of the things that violent perpetrators do is separate you from your network. So they don't want you around your friends. They don't want you around your family. They don't want you dealing with people at work on a social basis. So many times we won't spot the signs. Sometimes we will. Maybe they'll be hit in the face, or you might see something going on with their neck, but they may be getting hit on parts of the body that you don't see. Mm-hmm. And as well, if it's intimidation going, we're not privy to those conversations. Part of intimate partner violence includes animal intimidation. So maybe they'll tell you they're going to kill your dog if you tell, and you really, really love this dog. Or they're going to tell you, if you say anything, I'm going to take you and the children out. So there aren't signs all the time that we would recognize, but fear, anxiety, if you see someone with extreme withdrawal, if someone never has any money, someone never wants to associate with anybody else socially, if you see them wearing the same clothes all the time, that's a possible sign because they're not allowed to purchase new items. If you see all the time that the same person is picking them up and they're not picking them up and smiling and saying, hey, honey, how you doing? Let's go home. They're going, get in the car, or they rarely speak to other people. And so you really have to pay attention. Maybe they're crying a lot. Maybe if you touch them, they jump. So there are a lot of different signs, but there are a lot of signs that we may not recognize because people in intimate partner violent relationships become really good at hiding what's going on with them because of the fear that they live in constantly.
Vicki, go ahead. Go ahead, Linda.
No, I'm interested in your question.
I was just going to say, it was interesting that Vicki is sharing that because for me, I knew that there was a woman and she would never get involved in any activities at the church. And I finally asked her, why won't you stay? And she said, well, I have to be in the house by 2:00. And I'm like, 2:00.
Yeah.
She said, I have to be home by 2:00. My husband doesn't allow me to be out of the house past 2:00. I've got to go. And so she was running out the door every Sunday. It never occurred to me that this woman was being abused until later, that she was having some intimate partner issues. I just thought, wow, that's strange. And so I'm glad that Vicki is sharing some of the signs, because it will help others look deeper into the lives so that we can maybe help. And hopefully before we're done with the segment, Vicki can tell us what are the proper ways to help someone without causing further trauma to them.
Yes, and I want to make sure that we get all of that in, and just want to make sure that we're not at a break in the program, because I see the clock ticking away there. But that's an important step in addressing not only the fear for someone, but also becoming a community resource and support. How to recognize intimate partner violence in someone, even though the very subtle, because there must be signs, just as you've mentioned, Yvette. I've had, in thinking back on women who could not make a decision without first checking in. And I thought, well, that's wonderful. The Christian Bible says that you should submit to your husband. But I think this goes too far in terms of that they were crippled in their inability to make just a very basic decision, whether around types of foods or being able to spend, or even be able to manage their children's social schedule. Everything had to go through the filter of, is this going to be approved? Because if something wasn't approved, then I might feel the retaliation or the violence or the reprimand in a way that's going to really create that continuation of whatever the traumas I'm experiencing. So now I'm compounded by this situation. So I think it is important that we begin to know exactly how do we respond. How would we approach someone as Yvette's situation and the situations that I've experienced in retrospect? How do we do that? How do we not feel like we're crossing the line and getting into other people's personal business when in fact we might be the lifeline that they really need?
Well, first you have to be careful when you approach that person. You have to make sure that you're approaching them in a place where there are other people around, especially in a place where you think they're around the person that is abusing them. So you have to be careful. But an author named Chu, who is an expert in trauma and intimate partner violence, he writes in a book, and he has a 2011 book published on trauma. And he discusses intimate partner violence, and he talks about understanding help through the moniker SAFER, SAFER.
Can you repeat that? You got a little
self-care. We're looking under the moniker of SAFER, SAFER. And SAFER are a series of steps that we need to make sure the person that is being abused can follow in order for them to get help and to be free and live productively. So the S stands for self-care. So the first thing you really want to do in terms of self-care is to make sure you let them know, I am here for you. If you need medicine, if you need food, if the children need anything, maybe you can help them by setting aside or helping them put together a fund so they have emergency money if they need to leave. And there are many domestic violence networks in this country that will safe houses. Here in DC, the House of Ruth, for example, is a safe house for women escaping domestic violence, especially with their children. So after self-care comes incentive control. So they have to be provided with incentives on why it is important for them to leave. So if a woman is dependent on her husband financially, but he is beating her, or he is controlling her finances, what incentive does she have to leave? He's not going to allow her to work. She still has to feed herself and her children. So you want her to leave. What are you going to do to help her when she leaves? She still has to pay bills. She has to eat. Her kids need clothing. So that's the second thing. You have to give them incentives and help them understand what's going to happen. Then you have to get knowledge what is happening to them and the role it is playing for crippling their lives. That's really, really important because some people do not recognize the role that trauma plays in their life. They don't recognize it as trauma. Maybe they've been used to it for a long time and they just go, well, this is how it always was. A lot of people in intimate partner violent relationships have learned that behavior from their parents. So maybe their mother will say to them, well, what did you do to him? Go home and please your husband. You're not doing something right. So they learn that staying in that behavior is what they're supposed to do. So that's very important. Then you have to look at how they are functioning. What is the dysfunctioning doing? So if you're asking someone to leave their home or asking someone to leave an abuser, how are they going to function once they get out of that relationship? So making sure they have access to mental health and physical health is very, very important. So recognize if you pull somebody out, you may not be trained on what to do after you pull them out. You may not be trained in helping them when they feel anxious or nervous and they need to go back or they want to go back. So you really need to have mental and other type of professionals helping you with that.
And that's the acronym SAFER, SAFER. Did I say that correct?
Yeah, there's two more, but it looks, yes. So the E would be looking at how they are expressing their affect deregulation, meaning are they angry all the time now that you have them out? Affect deregulation is improper social skills, being anxious all the time, nervous, having fear of everybody and everything. And then finally, you have to
well, let's say the
give
R
them the
for when we come back.
so they can do the relational work, which is the R, the end of SAFER. Okay.
We're having a little bit of a delay. So let's not rush the R, and then we'll transition from the R to just a recap after we come back from the break.
Okay.
Anthony, are you there?
Yes. Yes, I'm here. So we'll take a quick break. We'll come right back. Folks, you're listening to the Marketplace Show Reset and Jumpstart here on WSCX 970 AM, on Tempo Television Network, on the Kalu Network, on La Mega Mundial, on Caribbean American Passport, on social media, and of course online as well. We'll be right back.
Small business is a part of all of us each and every day. It's where we eat, it's where we shop, it's where we go to meet our friends and colleagues. In the wake of COVID-19, our small business community desperately needs our help. We must do our part to help our local communities to once again thrive. We must focus our attention on the small businesses that are the fabric of our great nation. SureUp is a network of small business owners, their employees, and local consumers all working in unison to support each other. By creating incentives for consumers to think local before considering regional and national providers to fulfill their needs, we create local job opportunities and rebuild our communities. In addition, through AI-driven tools and machine learning, in just 5 minutes a day, SureUp assists business owners in improving their social media presence which enhances their visibility among consumers and levels the playing field so that local businesses can better compete with large, name-brand online competitors. When local businesses leverage the ShareUp platform, full-time and part-time employees, whether W-2 or 1099, are rewarded with a variety of voluntary perks and member benefit options. These include discounts on the things people do every day, access to low-cost, subscription-based telehealth and teletherapy, discounted prescription drug plans, connection to exclusive Prosper resources, and so much more. All for less than the cost of a cup of coffee each day. The Jumpstart Marketplace is here to support the health and wellness of individual employees, as well as the health of businesses in the local communities in which we live and work. We're all in this together, so join us as we reinvigorate our local community and improve the physical and financial health of working America.
All right, folks, we are back, and Linda and Yvette, we lost the connection with our guests, and I'm not sure what happened, but just wanted you to know.
Well, hopefully she will come back in, because we were really getting, it was a lot of good content, and I know that Ms. Braxton has, in her PhD studies, really studied this complete body of issues as it relates to IPV, or intimate partner violence. One of the things that strikes me, and one of the questions that you asked Yvette, related to something that I thought was maybe it's a little controversial to talk about it, but I kind of wonder if we have this, is it cultural? I mean, we broadcast to the Caribbean, to the Americas, and in some parts of the world, violence against intimate partners is a natural part of their social construct, their norms. We have honor killings and beatings in in certain countries as it relates to that. Is it a little controversial? I'm certainly not suggesting that it is justifiable, but is why this has become a global health issue because of some of these norms and cultural nuances, if you will, that violence against intimate partners is built into the relationship. And therefore, it's not necessarily viewed as a problem, is what I'm getting at. What do you think, Yvette?
Absolutely, Linda. My experience has been with a lot of cultural dislocation. Being a nurse, we get women, we recruit from the Philippines, from Afghanistan. We're recruiting women from all over the world because of the nursing shortage. And they come looking for that great opportunity, and they're coming with their husbands. But little but known to us, they're being abused when they get home because of that. A lot of it has to do with the man not feeling like he's the man because the woman is making the money, and they're coming from a cultural background where the man is the breadwinner and he's the one that always does everything. And now she's in his place in his eyes. He's not seeing this as an opportunity for him to grow, but one that this woman is taking my place. And so to belittle her, I hit her, I abuse her, I hit her. And you throw in, and I'm sure Vicki can attest to this, you throw in racism and police brutality. All these things are complex traumas which irritate your partner, no matter whether it's male or female. And especially if you throw in the cultural aspect, now you layer that on top of everything else that's going on. And so you have all these issues which lead to intimate partner abuse and violence. Vicki, would you like to expand?
I agree with you. I think that is also why a lot of women don't come forward, especially women who are Muslim, women who are Hindu. So if we're looking at it purely from the Christian perspective, we have some, I would say, fundamentalist religions where they're not going to come forward either. But ultimately, I think it is important that these women have a safe space if they finally decide to come forward. And remember, a woman speaking up in some cultures is automatic death.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's very important. So even when they come here, maybe they don't know that the law in the United States says you can't just have automatic death because you talk. So,
Well, we all have a personal story, and the daunting story that I have is that happened to I won't name the family member, but their OBGYN who delivered their baby happened to be from another part of the world where honor killing literally was an acceptable practice. It was almost an expected practice, even among the affluent. And you may get a slap on the hand or wrist or be ostracized or some part of your business taken away, but you certainly were never going to experience jail time or the punitive result of murder. And that's what happened here. Very prominent doctor, very prominent OBGYN, ultimately found that his wife was trying to escape to what we would consider a women's shelter as part of that safe space. And not only did he participate in her demise, but his two sons did as well. That was very traumatic, not only for my personal family, because it was a very close relation. It was confusing in that why would this very prominent person believe it was okay? And how do we help retrain individuals around those thoughts that were so ingrained culturally and generationally passed on? I don't know what we do, but what do you think?
Well, Vicki said something, Linda, if I could just piggyback on what you just said about being a Christian. And I don't know if I've ever shared that I too was in an abusive situation who was a pastor. And when we sought counseling, I was encouraged to sweep that under the rug because you don't tell what happens to your church. If there's something going on in your home, you get out there in front of that congregation and you better smile and wave and make it look like it's a fairy tale marriage.
Wow.
And it's cruel to do that. And I just wonder, thank God I had enough sense to get out. But I think about the other women that are still there. I knew other first ladies who were still in that situation who were not allowed to get out. And because they honor their religious beliefs so dearly, they won't do it. They'll stay right there. And it could possibly cost them their lives.
And then we add that as when you have children witnessing that behavior. So, the overarching theme of this particular part 2 and part 1 was the compound and complex traumas that we have to swim through in order to be productive, individuals of hope and possibility and reaching our potential. I think that what you've touched on, Yvette, is so taboo. It is almost like we need to have a complete program around the taboos that drive these kind of traumas and how do we take it out from the stigma. We're doing a beginning good job in mental health, but we're talking, it's just not this broader mental health. We're talking down into the weeds of what it really means to have the traumas, complex traumas and compound traumas. And I think that this is really, really an important conversation that we could not have more frequently if we could. One of
just jump in real quick.
Absolutely.
Let's not forget that in some cultures, for example, in the Latino culture, machismo is like huge. So men are taught to be men, and part of being a man is controlling your woman, controlling your family, and the Black community somewhat as well. So it's also important that when you help someone in this type of situation, you really need to be cognizant of what their cultural background is, because unless you really know, you're going to start transferring what you think is right for them on them, which causes them more trauma. You have to work within their thinking process of their own culture to help them be able to help themselves.
Okay. And before we go too far, you were giving us kind of the first phase of a treatment plan, or how we enter into supporting and helping someone. And you use the moniker safer, and we kind of rushed through the E and the R of safer. Can you just recap the E and kind of give us therefore the explanation of the R? Because I think this is if we can get people to think safer, then we will know how to better help someone in these situations.
So the E really involves a training of new behaviors. So having these victims look at their affect behavior, which is how they act inappropriately socially because of their anxiety, because of their trauma, because they're angry or fearful all the time. And then the R looks at the relational work they now have to do to get better. And that relational work requires having trained professionals and including family members that, if possible, can be part of the process. But if not, just making sure they have some network where they're receiving positive messages and that they constantly feel safe. But first and foremost, always, always, always is the safety of the person that is coming out of that relationship. Because remember, stalking is a huge part of intimate partner violence.
Yes, yes. And I have personally experienced that, the stalking part, and did not consider it. I just considered it to be weird and annoying, and not realizing that it would be a category description under intimate partner violence. And so we have to rise those behaviors up to where they should be. It's not right, and it has to be immediately addressed, particularly if you're in the healthy state of mind, to really put forth an effort to address it. Can you share with us, kind of back us all the way down to before we even get there, is there any association to childhood traumas that create a predisposed individual who's going to be someone engaged in or victim of intimate partner violence?
Sure. If they've been victims of childhood sexual assault, if they have been victims of watching that violence in their home, if they have been homeless, if they are socioeconomic situations. So, for example, you may have young women who are preyed upon by, well, they don't really call themselves pimps anymore, but let's say gentlemen who promise night jobs, but they're really sex worker jobs. And so this is a form of intimate partner violence as well, because they become intimate with these young girls first, and then they use fear, intimidation, and physical violence to beat them. So as well, you're talking about people that have been told they have to leave their families. So maybe they're gay and they weren't accepted by their families. So they're susceptible to intimate partner violence as well. So really, people that don't have a lot of self-esteem, people that are just desperate, a lot of them are really, it's their search for love. So some of them are just so desperate to be loved, and they associate this violence with love. Well, he wouldn't try to control me or keep me just with him if he didn't love me. Or, so that seems to be some of the biggest issues. And especially with COVID now, where a lot of people have lost their jobs, a lot of people are homeless. There's a lot of food insecurity going on now. So I think we really need to be concerned about how many people are going to get in contact with other people just to survive, that are going to find themselves in violent situations that they may not get out of.
Well, thank you, Linda. I would, if we could, can we just touch briefly on the fact that you don't walk into these relationships and the violence starts immediately. It's right. A progression. There's a wooing, so to speak, sometimes when they get to you, so that for our listeners out there who may be on their way into one of these traps and not know exactly how that starts, it starts with the gifts and taking you every place you want to go, and Santa Claus all the time, and then they start isolating you. If you could just expand on that really quick, because that's to me, that's important for our listeners to know, what am I getting myself into?
Sure, especially with young people in these types of relationships. So young girls especially are very impressionable. They'll have boyfriends, they'll buy them electronics, and look, I have the new iWatch, and I have a new iPhone, and they're getting shoes, and they're getting their hair done and their nails done, and they're associating this with, I got this great guy and he really, really takes care of me. And then what happens is the guy makes her think, listen, your family doesn't like me. I don't want to be around your family a lot. Let's go out. We shouldn't go to your mom's house. I don't want to come in when I pick you up. So then you have them going into someone's ear and telling them that their support system really doesn't support them. And then it can start with something little. So maybe you say something and they just pop you in the mouth, like, watch your mouth. So it might start with something little. Or maybe it's something you wear. It could be something you wear that maybe they bought you even, and they're like, why are you wearing that? Who are you trying to impress? And so it really starts out that way. And then they'll say, well, you're supposed to be here at 5 o'clock. It's 5:15. You're late. So now you're going to walk home in the rain by yourself. So they really condition you to become completely dependent on them. And Yvette's right. It's very gradual. Sometimes you might be engaged to somebody and the courtship and the engagement is wonderful. Soon as you say, I do, changes are coming. And some people are just like, what happened? And I think it's important, Linda, when you mentioned about people from other countries, I often say to people, when you marry someone, please examine their culture. Please understand what their culture is, because in some cultures, once you get married, the man makes all the decisions, and they can take your children from you, take them back to their home country. And in their home country, the children don't have to come back to you, because it is the man who is responsible for the children. So just have to be careful.
Yeah, so then you have to understand all your legal rights around a lot of different things, and whether or not you're putting yourself and your children in peril. So let's flip the script for the few minutes that we have left, and we do have just a few minutes left, because I want to go with what are some of the best approaches to preventing responding to IVF, because the World Health Organization has some very great strategies. And some of them we would think are common sense, but they're ones that we have to continuously reinforce in our society. And I'll just name a few and we can talk about them. Reform civil and criminal legal frameworks. Someone just got out of jail after, the accusation of individuals from 30 years of sexual abuse, admitting some of those, but yet just a few years later, he's now out of jail. We won't name that particular celebrity, but I think we probably could just look in the news and know that. Really build coalitions where governments are supportive across international borders. So to avoid having you move from culture to culture, country to country, and be subjected to IVF really in an imprisonment scenario at that point in time. And then use the evidence that we already have available, the evidence like your body of work that you're doing, Vicki, in your studies, and what I'm sure you have seen, Yvette, in your practice in the healthcare system. And just all of our personal experiences. I think we're all women on this particular show today that have had some touch with IVF in either a personal or very close relationship way. So we have can probably count ourselves as survivors and now knowledgeable to help other women. So what are some of the other approaches? I know maybe there's some social, getting women into business is one of them that we know. Can we just quickly touch on those before we break for the program? We have about a minute left.
I think you want to get them involved in social activities. I think you want to get them involved in a lot of group work. Group therapy works really, really well with people who have been victims of IPV. Making sure that they have numbers to domestic violence hotlines. They can contact the CDC. They can contact the National Center for Domestic Violence. They can contact their local hospitals. But real quickly, I just want to make sure that we also touch on that people in intimate partner violence are also more prone to suicide because they see that as the only way to escape than people not in these types of relationships. So I think that's really important to note as well, that there is a suicidal ideation attached to intimate partner violence.
And so we just hope that anyone listening that has any of these issues and concerns, that you reach out to your local authorities that we have provided, and certainly the National Suicide Hotline, because that is not the only resource and not the only way. There's help out there and help that is available to you. Thank you, Vicki Braxton, for part 2. We could go on and on and on for the next year talking about this.
Thank you.
But we have run out of time for this particular segment. And we appreciate your base of knowledge and you coming back on the show so graciously with your time.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much, ladies, for such a informative, insightful discussion on. I was backstage and I just kept shaking my head and can't really fathom what one has to go through in that experience. And one thing I say is, how is that? It's like a vicious cycle. It just keeps repeating itself over and over. And it's like, how is that even possible? How can, humanity has been around forever, right? And relationships have been around forever. And why is it that we just seem to be keep banging our heads against the wall and doing the same thing? It's beyond me. I don't get it. But who am I, right? I'm just one innocent, let me say innocent, but I'm just one person on the sideline, really observing the situation. But I'm trying to understand. It's a head scratcher. It's really,
and it's not just women, Tony. I mean, this is what we also have to appreciate.
I said
yeah,
no.
Men are victimized as well. But
yeah,
you're right.
Yeah,
Scratch our head.
I'm saying relationships, period. Men, women makes no sense to me, So. But anyway, we're out of time.
People who are murdered are victims of intimate partner violence too. It's almost 40% of females who are murdered in this country were victims of intimate partner violence. So
it's sad, really sad. Vicki, thank you so much for making a return to the program. You were here last week and you're here this week. Thank you so much, folks. I hope that
I appreciate it.
Presented that you find helpful. And again, if you need help, please seek it out. Don't think you're in it by yourself. All right. This has been the Marketplace Show Reset segment number 1 on health and wellness. We will talk to you next week. Coming up next, we have a special broadcast presentation. We are going to do a review of the Taiwan-U.S. Virgin Islands relationship and what we've accomplished within that 4 years. And so you're going to see some real footage that have never been seen before in terms of the number of delegations that we've taken over to Taiwan, and the Taiwanese have been here as well. So, folks, have a good day. And coming up next, segment number 2 on business, economy, and public policy is coming up next. We'll be right back.
Thank you.